Well, welcome back to Creatures of Habit. We're at the start of our second week. I hope your beginning of your habit journey is going well. I was just getting ready to mark down my work today. It wasn't quite breakfast, but I did have kale today in the form of a smoothie around lunchtime. So I think I'm going to give myself a check for that. And I'm excited that some of my work in staying with conversations seems to be bearing some fruit. So love to hear how your habits are going as well. Today we're going to look at both the story and the science behind habit change. I have a little video that I shot some years ago that illustrates habit change in an unusual way.
One of my favorite meditation teachers, a gentleman named Cory Muscara, talks about the cow path. I like to think of it as the well-worn path, a path that we've carved out through years of experience and adaptation. And sometimes that path doesn't serve us so well. The teaching short story that he shares about it is a story of a neuroscientist who was at a meditation retreat sharing a story. So this neuroscientist studied the workings of the brain, but he said the thing that helped him learn the most about our habits and how the brain works was his experience growing up at a farm and then coming back. So this person had grown up on the farm, and this farm had a barn. It had a bunch of cows. It was a dairy farm. It had a wonderful pasture that was particularly good for grazing. And each day the cows went out and they did their grazing. They found themselves at the farthest field away. And it was when it was time to come in, they wanted to make a beeline, but they couldn't. Why? Well, there were some trees between the pasture and the barn. And there was a creek. The cows had to go around all the way to a little path, a little bridge along the creek. There were some shrubs, some stones. And so we ended up with a very wavy path as the cows returned themselves from the pasture each day back to the barn. This was their well-worn path. Their habit to avoid the trees and the bushes and the water and the stones. Well, this neuroscientist moved off. His family sold the farm. And 20 years later, he was in the area, so he decided to come back. And what did he find? Well, he was pleased to see that the barn was still there. He was pleased to see that the cows were still there. There was still that wonderful pasture, but a couple things were gone. There was no creek. It had dried up. The stones had been removed. The bushes had died. And the trees had been cut down. There was a direct route back from the pasture to the barn. But these cows still followed the same path home every day, winding their way back and forth and back and forth. And I think we use these same strategies in our own lives, that we've developed habits that no longer serve us, but we don't recognize them so that we let them go.
So I'd invite you, to the extent that it feels comfortable and safe, to just take a minute now. Reflect on your own well-worn path. What from your past might have been an adaptive habit that served you well at the time, but might not be serving you well anymore? I grew up in a household where you really had to follow the rules, where there would be consequences. And so I stayed right on the straight and narrow. My well-worn path was quite thin. What does that look like 47 years later? Well, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I'm always trying to fix things. And I'm such a tight rule follower that sometimes it's a little hard for me to have fun. Now, knowing that is a good part of the battle. It might mean that my practice of carving out a wider path would be to break the rules every now and then, to kick back and relax. And it's such a process. You experiment. You go off that path, and then you realize that you're scared, and you come back and back and forth and back and forth until eventually you're introducing more and more choice into your experience. Like I shared with that Viktor Frankl quote, when we put some space between the stimulus of our experience and our response, that's where things really get cool, really get exciting. Creatures of Habit, a 29-day mindful habit change journey, is offered by Center for Self-Care. You can find out more about us at www.center4selfcare.com. This program is offered by donation, and we won't turn anyone away for lack of resources. But your donations are greatly appreciated to support our work, as well as the work of artists David Gerbstadt and Scientific Eve, who have created the logo as well as the music for this offering. A portion of your donation will also be shared with No More Secrets, a Philadelphia-based organization dedicated to ending period poverty in our area and destigmatizing issues of sexual health. If you'd like to support our work through a donation, you can do so by registering on our website, sending us Venmo at center4selfcare.com, or PayPal, connect@centerforselfcare.com. So the science of habit change is just this. In our brains, we have all these neurons. They're firing all the time. They control our basic body functions. They control our thought processes. They control our coordination. And it's been said that the neurons, these connections in our brain, the neurons that fire together, wire together. So as we practice something, either good or bad, that kind of hardens in our mind. And it's literally true. We have to go back to adolescence here, but if you remember all the lyrics to your songs from your prom, or the Thursday night NBC TV lineup from when you were a kid, but can't remember what you had for lunch today, that makes a lot of sense. As adolescents, between the time we're maybe 12 and 25, we're undergoing this process called myelination. Have you heard of it before? It's basically an insulating material in our brain. So when we start practicing the piano or a new language at the age of 12 or 15, those knowledge bites, particularly in the night when we're sleeping, get kind of hardened. They get covered with a fatty substance called myelin that both reinforces but also speeds and makes more efficient those neural connections by many thousands of times. So we might not have a lot of myelin flowing around our brains anymore, but we can still enact change. There's some great research on juggling. And if you begin to learn how to juggle and juggle a little bit every day, the brain scans and fMRIs show gray matter growth within just 7 days. And a proficient juggler is night and day from a non-juggler's brain in terms of gray matter growth. And there's other neuroplasticity features such as reduced inflammation, lower cortisol levels that can be really helpful in harnessing us to be our best selves. So I encourage you to fire those neurons of good habits, let go of those neurons of bad habits. In adolescence, it's called pruning. So in a sense, we'll be tendering our garden over the next several weeks. I look forward to how it goes with your accountability partners, and I'll be in touch soon.